Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us. I'm Becky, the Chief Executive Officer of the English Association, and I'm really pleased to be hosting this session this evening. A little bit about the EA, if you're not familiar with our work. We're a learning society and a subject association, which was founded in 1906 to promote, support, and defend the discipline of English studies. We cover all stages of education from primary and early years through secondary and further education to higher education and beyond. And we cover all parts of the discipline across language, linguistics, literature, and creative writing. Events like this one are made possible by the fantastic contribution of our volunteer speakers. So a huge thank you from me, first of all, to tonight's speakers, Laura and Kate. Our members also make it possible to keep these events free and open to all by paying their membership fees. So if you would like to contribute to the national conversation about English and help support our discipline, please do consider joining us. It costs just £53 to support our events and campaigning work for a whole year, and you'll get access to a range of member benefits, including online access to all our journals. I'll pop a link to our website in the chat so you can take a look at that later. But for now, it's my great pleasure to hand over to tonight's speakers for our discussion. Kate, over to you.
Thank you very much, Becky. Yes, my name's Kate Deraker and I'm a lecturer in Renaissance Literature at Newcastle University. And this is my colleague and a student at Newcastle University, Laura. Laura, I'm just going to start sharing the screen, but do you want to introduce yourself too?
Yeah, no problem. I'm Laura. I'm a third year student at Newcastle University. I study in combined honours, so I do English literature and sociology.
Thank you. Right, so hopefully can you all see this screen? What we're going to do is use PowerPoint slides, but at the end, if you want, then we can do a sort of a click through of our exhibition and we can show you a bit of what it looks like on the behind the scenes. There are some screenshots here otherwise. But hopefully you'll have some thoughts about this style of teaching and how we might actually be able to move from something which is really more of a research project into a teaching project in your own kind of pedagogy. So we'd love to hear about your thoughts too. This started out, oh, hang on, here's the an outline of what we did. So we're going to talk a bit about the Digital Nashe research project, more about how we made it, and then we're going to move on to talking about what we learned from each other, so as a student and teacher together, and talking about ways that we could apply that to our teaching. This project is one in a long line of projects about the Thomas Nashe, project about the writer called Thomas Nashe. That project starts off with an editorial project where there will be 5 or 6 big volumes of Nashe's work. The last time that this writer's work was edited was in 1911. And so it's, you know, he's in time for an update. That project started with Jennifer Richards and Andrew Hadfield and other collaborators who it started in 2015, who started off this editorial work, but there was also a sort of an outreach component, and there were lots of different events, recordings, podcasts, and those events end up in our digital world being digitally recorded, and so we have to sort of store them somewhere. Now, digital products are so ephemeral that often you have to, when you're applying for funding, you have to demonstrate that you can keep it in an institutional space. So we used the university website for that, and you can see a kind of an image there. The problem is that website is very clunky. We had a sort of a follow-on project called the Penniless Project, which I and Kathy Schrank at Sheffield initiated. And that took the premise of some of the things we were looking at with this writer and applied it to a more modern perspective on his work, namely what it is like to experience precarity in the Elizabethan period and in our own time, especially post-COVID and post-Brexit. there too, we ended up sort of saving most of these materials that we produced. All of them were outreach items. So that was stuff like a zine, oral testimonies with students, performance recording, podcasts, and a webinar, which we did with the English Association. All of those outreach kind of products had to be stored somewhere. And the only place, again, that we really had was the university website. However, I wanted to do something more visually interesting, and also in a way something that which would narrate it better than just having, you know, if you look here, like a kind of a drop-down list. And an idea came to me because of the work that we've been doing with our students at Newcastle, especially in a second year module that I teach on called Renaissance Bodies. That kind of a project would be assessed, yes, by like a long form essay, but we gave students the option to think about ways to present what is actually fairly niche research in a more accessible way. Why? Because actually that's an important employment skill, of course. That's something that 8 out of 10 employees want from humanities graduates, because humanities graduates are especially good at being able to communicate complex ideas in a clear manner. And to do this, we gave students options to either put a sort of a performance program together. So we've got this here for the play The Tragedy of Mariam, a sort of an imagined performance, to create some curated blogs. So this student has written Wenches Weekly about witches and witchcraft, or to do a digital exhibition. This is not from our, this is from a third year special kind of project on for examination through dissertation, and this is about fairy tales from Ireland. And so it was with that knowledge that we had been working with students who were used to using kind of digital exhibitions, that I thought, actually, this is something I could try out with all of these products that we've got for Nashe. It also so happens that our university library has a special collections which is making good use of exactly that, of digital exhibitions. You can check them out for yourself here. And what they have are digital exhibitions by partners, and so by researchers attached to the university, but also by students from across the university. For example, here we've got one student, master's student working on museum and gallery studies, and another student in exhibiting text, which is an English literature module about Gertrude Bell's work. So the way that the special collections works is that they have signed up to a sort of the professional version of shorthand.com's digital exhibition kind of creator. You can, as an individual, sign up to this, but the problem is that it's still limited to, you can have one live project at a time. That works fine for our students. So, you know, our stage 2 students on that Renaissance module can just sign up and produce one thing for us. But obviously, if you want to be in a position of producing more of these, say if you're, you know, teaching a module and you want to produce more examples, then you kind of need an institutional version of this, which is a problem. And that's something maybe we can discuss. Are some of these methods that we're suggesting predicated on having to buy in to, you know, a financial package, which isn't necessarily something that every school or every teacher can afford? However, this is to show you the kind of what the format is, and you can always have a look yourself. You know, this shorthand is used for this sort of immersive type of journalism. Essentially, you might recognize it as a form for long form essays in things like The Guardian or the BBC. And so we use that here, and this is just to show you what it looks like from our perspective. It's quite a lot like WordPress if you're used to that. So on the left, you've got these sort of tiles and you can reorder them. And then in this space centrally, you have different sections of text which you can move around. Having said that, it was a very fiddly process, and Laura and I both sort of spent like weeks trying to, you know, goad each other on to actually try and start using it. I'm going to pass over to Laura now to talk about the beginning process. So this is the finished result, but it started somewhere very different.
Yeah, the planning process was a really important part of the project. There was a huge wealth of material that already existed in the Nashe project. Things like oral histories, stage productions, Jess Hayward's illustrations, and Anna Brass's film. Kate shared all of those things with me over a shared folder in Google OneDrive. And then my starting point was to look through all of that material and familiarize myself with it, to start generating themes and ideas for some sort of narrative for the exhibition. So I made a mind map out of all of those things, and I actually found that really useful because there was such a diversity of material. And we used that mind map then as a starting point to discuss how to put the exhibition together. And as we work through the project, we've communicated with each other over a shared Word document so that we could add our thoughts and ideas for different pages of the exhibition. And that was really useful because that kind of acted as an asynchronous conversation alongside real-time conversations and video calls that we were having in Teams and Zoom. So that was a really good space because it meant that I could ask questions about really specific things. So quotes from specific people or books or more in-depth history about politics or the history of the time. And then Kate was able to answer that with links or citations and things. So that was really a really useful way of communicating.
And in that way, it was something where I was able to teach, but it was in a you know, organic kind of way. It wasn't me planning out, this is what we're going to talk about. It was in response to Laura's own kind of curiosity about that topic. And so we end up with moving from sort of our planning document, and especially Laura's mind map here. She identified something that really stood out to her about all of the stuff that we'd done with Nashe, which was this zine that the artist Jess Hayward had created. And Jess herself had been inspired by the fact that our writer Thomas Nashe explored issues of ephemerality and kind of cheap pamphlets, right? So he's writing kind of literary text, but he's using quite a cheap printed, quick printed format. And so Jess was therefore also overlaying like the high art of her style. As you can see, this incredibly intricate style, but experimenting with different materials, such as, can I print this on even more ephemeral material like tracing paper or tissue paper, for example. Also, that the form was going to be as a zine as well, was something important, as a kind of modern day equivalent of the pamphlet. And so it was that Laura kind of picked out as something that she was interested in. And you can see here, Laura, do you want to talk a bit about some of the work that you did, that I've kind of got images of? How did you create? So on the right hand of the screen, we've got some of Laura's artwork, really. How did you create this for the project?
They were all quite new methods to me, actually, these things, which was another nice thing about the project, that freedom to create and just try out different things, take a few risks. So I just kind of experimented with, that was a sketch on my iPad, and other things like digital transparency, similar to Jess Hayward's images of scans of the text and images like in the bottom corner there. And then using other things like Canva to build graphics and things. So yeah, really the idea of the zine was a really big, I think, inspiration for lots of the design choices that we made, and things that I probably wouldn't have explored doing otherwise.
And I mean, it was an aesthetic, of course, a way to make the things hang together, but it also had a kind of political message too, right? And Laura's going to talk a bit more about that later. Luckily, Newcastle, we've got a great art collection here of the Baltic, and it in Gateshead. And the Baltic also has an online version, Baltic Plus, where you can have a look at, it has lots of collections of zines. And it just happened that when Laura and I were talking, there was, it was zine month in June. And so it had an exhibition of all of these zines that had been created by local people. And it was sort of, collating them. And indeed, our this Nashe zine by Jess Hayward is there alongside all of those. So what I learned from working with Laura, I'd say the most obvious thing is that I feel like I have a fresh perspective on the research, which, you know, obviously the longer that you stick with something, you become a bit blinded to and so it was just useful to have someone new see it with fresh pair of eyes. It also, I learnt things from Laura. We know this, like you're endlessly learning from your students, really. And so Laura's a combined honours student, which means that she studies both English and sociology and is looking for ways that they connect. And so I've learnt new terminology like bounded agency, which has been quite useful for ways of thinking, not just about the pressures on young people today, but also young people from the past. And then it's also helped me pedagogically because I've been thinking more about actually what the purpose of assessment is and ways that we can expand that as a convener of a stage 1 module, looking at early literature, thinking about this as a possible method. Okay, and there we are.
I learned a lot from doing this. I think the major thing was it did break down some misconceptions about this binary between staff and students. It really illustrated how we can all learn from each other, and that building knowledge is a conversational process. It's not a Smaug pile of gold to sit and hoard for yourself. We can all learn from each other. And it really did help with my confidence. When you take that approach to knowledge, it gives you confidence in your own abilities and the confidence to experiment and take some risks. So after I did this exhibition with Kate, I took part in the university's Sustainable Futures Challenge with a proposal to increase the privacy of disabled students and accessing their reasonable adjustments. And the proposal actually won. I've seen similar opportunities in the past and always felt like I might be a bit out of my depth and never really went for it. But this time I felt more sure of myself after I'd done this exhibition with Kate. And similarly, that confidence has enabled me to take more of an innovative approach to my final year combined honours project, which is on zines as space makers for chronically ill people. And that's also been inspired by some of the themes that came up during the Nashe project. The idea that ephemeral print for Nashe was his way of making space for himself as a writer. That made me think about how contemporary zines function in similar ways and how fascinating that is that occurs so many centuries on. And I've also been inspired to use shorthand as the output for my final year project because we get a bit of flexibility with that in combined honours. Not only because of its ability to present different types of media in a visually appealing way, but because of its potential to disseminate information in a way that's more aligned to crypt time being a concept from crypt theory, which accounts for the ways that disabled people experience time differently from non-disabled people. So things like needing to consume information in small amounts at a time in non-linear ways, maybe in different formats at different times of the day. I'm disabled myself, and leaning into crypt time means that when we think about the accessible formats, it's not just a commercial formality, it's a community building process. And that's especially important in academia, where chronically ill and disabled people are vastly underrepresented. And crypt theory also talks a lot about the value of interdependence and creating more inclusive environments and the reworlding of knowledge through collaborative and innovative ways. This project's just been a great example of that. If you are interested in reading more about that, May Chazen has written a lot on it, which there's a link there at the bottom of the slide.
And let me go. Okay, so I guess the question that we have for you is, you know, this worked as a 1-to-1 ratio, right? And it wasn't intended necessarily as a teaching project. It was intended as a research project, except that there was extra funding in the budget. And I thought, well, given that I've got the idea from the stuff that I know our undergraduates can do, why not actually work with an undergraduate and, you know, be able to use that money for an internship and see where that goes. But actually, this is something where, as Laura's saying, there's so much more to it than just, oh, it would be a kind of a nice thing for them to do from an employment perspective. Of course, there's that. It's good to be able to say you can communicate your ideas well to employers later. But especially this focus on accessibility, it feels like we need to expand the different ways that we assess and teach as well. So how do we do that? This worked fine because, you know, it was working regularly over the summer period 1-to-1, but how can you replicate that in your classroom? Things that we were thinking about that might be relevant for this. Firstly, it was necessary to have that massive information. All of those electronic resources from the Nashe project were there at hand. I didn't have to create anything extra to give to students. You know, it was there. So you would need to curate materials to begin with. And I think rather than setting out with, I mean, I knew I had a project in mind, which is that I wanted to have a clear narrative for these materials. But I didn't have any preconceptions about what necessarily that narrative should be. You know, and actually having Laura look at it afresh helped draw out that narrative. So I think it's important that whatever project you're doing, you're curating it as a teacher, but not necessarily trying to force them down a certain alleyway of that they should discover something along the way. So basically a bit more of a hands-off approach. Similarly, that it should be a student-led group. So say this is something which you can do for a group rather than 1-to-1, that really students probably need quite a lot of time initially to sift through material and discuss it together. If you should be there, because if you're breaking down barriers between students and teachers, then you should, you know, not just be an external, like, you know, eye in the sky or deity who's suddenly, you know, brought in, but you should probably be there along discovering things with them. But of course, it's always quite difficult not to turn into a seminar leader mode, but actually that, you know, consider yourself as a discussant. So a sort of a horizontal, I guess, like structure of power here. We do have this at Newcastle. We used a flipped classroom approach for study group reports, but in that sense, it's very much student-led, and then they come to the teacher-led session, hopefully prepared. That's slightly different from saying, actually, we're the teacher's there, but the power dynamic is slightly shifted. And then I guess final point would be, it probably is crucial that the format should not be an essay, if for whichever project you're wanting to do, because we both were trying to get to grips with shorthand as a form, Laura and I, and it was good that it was new to us both. It was an unknown format, because it means that you actually have a proper delegation of different tasks, and different people's skills can just pop up as unbidden, or well, not unbidden, bidden by this task, but it's not something you can plan, right? It just happens to be the chemistry of the people who are there. But it's to rely on the fact that everyone brings with them useful prior experience, knowledge, and that they will have different problem solving skills that they can bring to it. And actually that's the bit that's the confident making thing. It's giving you a task and trying to work out a problem together, and finding that it's possible to do so. Okay, so that's our suggestions. Thank you very much for listening. And I'm going to stop sharing now, but it would be great if you had any questions for us. And if not, our question provocation to you is, Is it possible to transfer this sort of research project, a collaborative project, over onto more of a teaching format, like a module in itself? Kristen.
Hello, that was wonderful. I'm so excited for both of you. I've had the pleasure of enjoying these experiences with students, and I'm working with an intern now, and I wish I'd asked her to join me because I know she would be inspired. Laura, I especially love your mind map. My student I have a project, the Kip Marlowe project, and we're redesigning the front of it, but now you've given me new ideas right after we pretty much settled on the design. But I love this idea of building in this narrative, and thinking the way you were. Like I said, the mind map was really wonderful and exciting, and then to pull this together into a narrative form. And there are other, just if story map is a good one. The Night Labs has modules called like story maps and things like that are free, and you can make as many of them as you want. So that might be another resource that's accessible for teachers to use. I've just started playing with them with my students myself, but I'm thinking about how you leverage this, and I've been grappling with that for several years myself as I do projects with students. And we have an internship system kind of built into the English major. And we also just got a digital humanities minor up and running. So I take my digital humanities students and have them do early modern research. They always have a capstone early modern project, whether they want to or not. One of them is transcribing and encoding. But one thing, if you're thinking about is the goal publication, I guess, Kate, is that like when you're thinking about assessment, does this need to go out in the world and not be a disposable assignment?
I mean, I don't, that's a good question. I feel like it would be useful to have it as to refer to afterwards, because then thinking about it, you should be able to present it to someone. I guess you could always take screenshots of a thing, but it would be useful to have something that's got at least some kind of, lives on a little bit.
So one thing I was working on with my librarian before she became frustrated with our bureaucracy and left me, is working with the library, the LibGuides that most libraries have, and creating them with students. And creating a space for maybe an experimental learning LibGuide or something like that, where you could post students' work, or even a course, kind of a WordPress or something where you could have the class, or like Kate, all your students can contribute to this one space, and you could have different categories, and they could see what other people have done. That might be another.
Done over time, yes. I mean, because like this, the shorthand thing was provided by the library, and we do have that for like the capstone project at the end of the degree, and we've built in like other options for students who want to try something other than an essay, and one of those is doing a digital exhibition like this, and it's hosted by the library. So yeah, talking with them about ways that we can do that would be a good start. Thank you.
Yeah,
well, Laura, do you have an idea about do you think that whatever is produced you would prefer as a student to have live for a couple of years afterwards, or are you fine with it being ephemeral like a Zine?
Yeah, I mean, if it had to be ephemeral, I would accept that and I'll be okay with it. I think it's nice to have that longevity, and I think it probably is something that helps and contributes to the confidence building in the student. Like if you've got something then that you can produce and show to somebody, and in a sort of more cynical way, you can probably put in like a CV type experience as well. But I think being able to have something tangible there that you can show somebody, I think would probably add to the confidence building process.
Thank you. Thanks, Kristen. Any other questions? Or I mean, I'm kind of or actually examples of ways that you've built it into your teaching or your research interests. I'd be curious to hear about if anyone else has done something similar to this, or and I guess also like the limitations, because that's, you know, I can see them, but I'm not sure I can see all of them. So what are the things that you think it would or would not work if we tried to apply it to different types of teaching, especially things like, you know, secondary education? Does it work there? Yes, Kristen.
Sorry.
No, go. Oh, you're on mute again.
Sorry about that. One thing I've experienced a lot is that, so Laura, you're awesome, and this is beautifully written, and it's a gorgeous exhibit, but not all students are so skilled. So those exhibits, if you do want to share them in the public, frequently are not ready in the course of a single semester. So one thing that can help is to have them just do their best. And then that's where an intern, maybe a Laura, would come in and edit and revise and polish and tweak and get it ready for publication. So taking that pressure off the single semester production line. I used to try to get my students to get things done in a single semester, and it nearly broke all of us. So it took all the fun out of it. But it took that exploration and that, you know, the kind of thinking outside the box and non-linearly and things like that away. So that's a challenge I've come up with against.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, so thinking about that, potentially it would be maybe better to have it as an ephemeral, or, you know, it doesn't have to be published, and then you select the ones that are maybe better as a showcase thing. Jenny, you have a question.
Yeah, I was just thinking that, I mean, this will fly if some kind of I mean, it's not that. So, Laura, first of all, this is fantastic. I absolutely love the website, and thank you for all your work on it. It's not like you said, Kate, that you were both learning how to use shorthand, and it took some time back and forth. But you weren't learning. You didn't have to learn to code. So it doesn't. So it is about using a database that's already set up, and I just wonder whether it's the amount of time that you spend learning how to use it will be the thing that will put off other teachers from using shorthand and students. But if it were normalized as part of the training for doing an undergraduate degree, just as that we spend so much time on essay skills, for example, then suddenly it becomes. And if we were to, for English literature, sort of take it seriously, the fact that the digital is now part of our world and we can do things with it, it would make it a lot easier, I think. I don't know what, Kate, whether you've had any conversations with colleagues in the school at Newcastle about trying to normalize this kind of thing.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I mean, it's you realize that in contrast to saying, well, okay, we're going to have to teach you how to code in order to. Of course, we also do that, plugging Newcastle, but we do that at Newcastle as well. There's an option to have your final project be through digital edition, and that involves like a really intensive course in coding. And I know that, Kristen, you're also teaching coding as well as part of your Kit Marlowe project. So actually, in comparison, using something like shorthand or a WordPress site isn't really, because it's already, you know, it's fairly user-friendly. It's rather that that can also be limiting, right? So you can't, your imagination can, you know, you can go a certain way, and then actually you're restricted by the format. I think with colleagues, what we come up against is that they don't, I think the idea that this is pure presentation only, and that it doesn't allow the depth of thinking they think, in contrast to an essay. And I was trying to work out why this was. And I think, yes, okay, maybe essays are better at demonstrating process, because different sections of an essay we're used to in an introduction, in a conclusion, in signposting. You might not overtly be saying, in this essay, I'm going to argue that. You might have a slightly slicker way of doing it, but it's not far off. You're showing your thinking, your research process there. And I don't think it's missing from this research project because it's all about our thinking. But I have seen student projects where it isn't clear how they got to the product where they landed, you know, like for example, like the witch, you know, the idea of having a gossip blog by witches, etc. There's no space for the rationale that there is in an essay, and I think that's the sticking point. So that is a potential limitation and something that you would need to build in, or otherwise have a separate section where, you know, a student could write reflectively. That would also work for a group situation, right? So say it's a group project, obviously different students contribute differently, and a lot like having to, you know, give oral presentations. You need to know that different people could be similarly engaging with it, but not necessarily, you know, the front and center presenters. So in quite a lot of these cases, you need an opportunity for students to have their piece and to give a reflection on what they did and what they learned about that process. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, any other thoughts about that, or any other questions that you might have? Kristen.
Talking too much. I'm sorry. I just came from another meeting and I've had a lot of coffee. It's morning for me too. Or actually midday. But so Kate, what you're saying, when I do this too, and I've been having a lot of conversations with the English department about how to do just this and how to integrate project-based learning into assessment in a way that's meaningful. And while they're still making me give final exams, they are moving gently. I've shown them metacognitive reflections where students have to have a rationale, a thesis statement, and an argument for what they chose to work on, and then what they learn from it. And it's not that long, but all the components that we like to assess are there. But moving forward, when world and time permit, I've just gotten a new graduate course through where it will be project-based, the first project-based English class. So I'm excited to see how that goes moving forward. But yeah, in a world, the last conversation was about data-driven assessment and learning objectives and backward design and things like that, and how frustrating that can be when it kind of shuts down critical thinking. And Laura, what you were talking about people who are disabled, and I have a lot of neurodivergent students who really struggle with those kinds of pedagogies. So I think we're at a point where we need to be renegotiating these things at an institutional level. So I'm just so excited for what you did. It's awesome. Congratulations.
No, I'm looking for, I think we should learn much more from your project as well. I just reminded me another thing that's coming, and I'm sure it must be coming on the radar for other people too, is what do we do about AI becoming, you know, potentially equivalent to like spell checker? So if your main mode of assessment is an essay, and actually it's quite easy, it becomes quite easy to structure an essay, how do you use it? And actually this sort of project-based work, it means that part of that assessment has to be, you know, it's something which evolves over a certain amount of time. It's not the same as asking a device to write something for you. I don't know if anyone else thought that might be another kind of answer. That's another possible reason for it as well. Yeah, sorry, I was waiting to see. Okay, I think, well, we're coming up to 25 past. There are not any more questions. I'll hand it back over to Becky.
Thank you so much. What a fantastic session. Thank you very much to Laura and Kate. We'll make this recording available on our website so we can circulate it with any colleagues who couldn't make it, because there's so much learning in here to share with people. And thank you to everyone who came along and shared your evening with us. It's been great to have you, and we hope to see you again soon. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye, everyone.